Dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. Yes, it is Texit Tuesday on a Wednesday. Why, you might ask? Well, when you gotta work until nearly 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, it's just not practical to put out your Texit Tuesday on a Tuesday. So we show up on Wednesday. Why? Because we don't want to leave our fans waiting. Yes. So, why do I bring this up yet again, Texas Tuesday? Well, in case y'all didn't know, next week Monday, so it's going to be a Texit Monday, by the way, we're going to have none other than the man who wrote the book on Texit, Daniel Miller, coming to McKinney at 7 p.m. I'm sorry, scratch that. 6:30 p.m. He will be there at 107 East Lamar, and that would be Redemption Point Church. For those of you that don't know, that is just north of the downtown library in McKinney. So, I know, some of you are afraid. Some of you are fearful. Some of you have concerns about, oh no, not Texit. Well, here's the thing. Don't you think you ought to actually know about what it is you're concerned about? Don't you think you ought to have a better understanding of what's involved? Don't you have any curiosity of why some normal average people actually want to consider Texit? So, the guy that wrote the book, again, next Monday, Redemption Point Church, downtown McKinney, be there for 6:30. We're going to get an opportunity to hear the arguments. There's going to be an opportunity to ask questions. There's going to be time to discuss what's going on. My friends over at Constitutional Texans are hosting this. You should check it out. I will include a link down below when I'm done with this video. It should be well worth your time and your efforts. I guess it's $10 to get in. Be there or don't be there. But if you're not there, you'll have to listen to the podcast for what I think about that. This is According to Callus. I'll see you on the podcast. So, in case you're wondering, the short answer is if you're not there, then I don't want to hear about it. That's right. You know, the time for timidness, the time for tolerating fear, the time for letting our concerns dictate what we do is over. The time to advance is here. The time to be bold is here. The time to speak truth to power is here. You know, the Marxists, under various names, under various functions, most of them letter acronyms that we're all familiar with, they have no problem shoving down their thought process, shoving down their talking points, impressing upon us what it is and what they want and when they want it. But if you're going to conserve anything, that's going to require that you get off your butt. If you're going to advance liberty, that requires that you get engaged. If you're going to do battle in the arena of ideas, you have to actually know what those ideas are. You have to actually be able to answer the questions. You have to actually be able to articulate reasons for why you believe what you believe. You're never going to convince anybody by being a jerk. You're never going to be able to convince anybody by not having answers. You're never going to be able to convince anybody by dismissing their questions, their concerns, or their commentary. You have to be willing to engage. You know, just last night I was trying to have a discussion with my wife, and as I am wont to do at times, I switched into political mode with her, and I started to respond in such a way that, quite frankly, rubs her the wrong way. And she basically said, I have no time or energy to debate with you, Stephen. Which kind of took me aback because I thought I was being pretty objective, pretty even keel about the whole thing. But upon further reflection, she had a point. I went into a mode of discussion. And while that's appropriate with somebody that you disagree with, it's appropriate with somebody that maybe is fronting a different value or a different demand upon you that you meet power for power. probably not a good idea with your wife that's supposed to be your greatest ally, supposed to be your best friend. But, I don't ever claim to be perfect, and I sure as heck don't ever claim to be never wrong. So that would be an example where, yes, Mr. Callis got it wrong. And my wife, whom likes to point that out when I do that, once again was right. And the constant refrain that I tell her, and all my friends at work think this is a riot, and they like to say it too, is everybody loves Amy. For those of you that aren't aware, that's a riff off of Everyone Loves Raymond, right? And the reality is at most get-togethers that we go at, and I bring my wife along, pretty much everybody likes my wife better than me. I don't know what that says about me, but I think that's pretty great that everybody likes my wife. And so, that just gets me more engaged and more fired up and makes me feel like I can conquer the world at times. Back to the subject at hand. When conservatives, for lack of a better descriptive word, are timid, or they stay risk adverse, they fail to achieve their objectives. They fail to do what they need to do, which is to aggressively defend liberty, to not be fearful, be willing to accept the consequences of making errors, but to go forth in the battle knowing that battle may be the last one they get to take part in. That battle may be what saves the republic. That battle is just as important as every battle before it and every battle to follow. And you have to show up to battles. If conservatives, constitutionalists, Christians, whatever you want to classify yourself as, if you stay home and say, well, God's in control, we don't really need to worry about this. If you stay home and just say, well, Romans 13, and you stay home, and well, it's not my worry, that's the next town over, and you stay home, and while there's not widespread voter fraud, that really wouldn't change the outcome, and you stay home, well, just because they're a little corrupt, everything's corrupt, we just got to live with it, and if you stay home, you get more of the same. They attribute this phraseology that, to continue to do the same thing and expect a different result is a form of insanity to Eisenhower. We'll talk about that. If I was going to attribute anything to Eisenhower, it would not be that. But Einstein. So they attribute that to Einstein, which may or may not be true. But the reality is my friends on the conservative side, we always go back and do the same things and think we're going to get a different answer. Now, we cannot continue to do the same things we've been doing and expect better or different results. We can't go show up once a year into the poor side of town and say, vote for us. And those people all look at us and say, who are you and what do you want? And why should I vote for your guy that couldn't care less about us? Can you blame them? Can you understand where they're coming from? For all we talk about is personal responsibility and independence and being able to do things on their own and charity and all these other things, and we don't want government to do it, that means we need to be doing it. That means we need to lead by example. And when we got churches, they close up, sit at home, and whisper and chant Romans 13, Romans 13, Romans 13. And we've got all sorts of clubs that were fearful that, no, we can't meet. Why are we doing this to ourselves? We're supposed to be leading by example. We're supposed to be taking charge. We're supposed to be on the forefront of defending liberty. And we can't do that if we're afraid to leave our little soft shell world environment that we live in. If we can't get beyond the echo chamber that many of us live in. Now, look, I have plenty of friends that we can riff and talk for hours about political things, and the variance of degree between us is pretty minimal. But I will tell you, I thoroughly enjoy getting into a respectful, I want to say confrontation, but conversation, a respectful conversation with differing opinions. I don't expect that the majority of people are going to agree with the majority of the things I believe. And when I spent
the vast majority of my adult life identifying as a libertarian. That was kind of understood, right? It's 5% maybe of the American public would describe themselves as some form of libertarian. And for a little while, thanks to Ron Paul, it maybe bumped up to 8 or 10%. Well, I'm kind of sort of libertarian, or I identify as a libertarian, or I'm libertarian on this issue. Well, that's really not how it works. That's really not the way it goes. Now, the reason why I have some challenges is, claiming to be a full-fledged libertarian is a lot of them are for open borders. And I just think that's insane. And actually, one of the guys I looked up to that was a long-term associated with the Libertarian Party and libertarianism in general, was Vin Supernowitz. I think I got that last name right. He was from the Las Vegas Review paper. He wrote a couple of novels. But one of the things he wrote about or talked about was you cannot have a libertarian or free society with open borders because people will continue to move in there and they will simply just change the rules. They'll change the rules to suit their purposes. They'll change the rules to get what they want. They'll change the rules to basically strip you away of all that liberty that you had. And that's just not a good recipe for any kind of liberty-loving society, right? Now, notice I'm not saying keep out all the Latinos. That's not what that's about. I know there's a good section of people, both sides of that argument, that think that's what it's about, but it's really not. It's about keeping the Marxists where they belong, in the countries that they've destroyed already. We don't need to be importing them here to destroy our country. And those Marxists could be Chinese Marxists, European Marxists, Canadian Marxists, or south of the border Marxists. It matters not where they come from or what they look like or what language they speak. No Marxist is a good Marxist as far as I'm concerned. They bring nothing that is useful to a liberty-loving society. I want that to sink in. The second thing is, there's an internal debate within the libertarian movement as to if every life has value and we must protect life, we have to determine, is the baby in the womb considered on equal turf with the mother? So now, the guy's name is escaping me at the moment. It'll probably come to me as I discuss it. But there is a frequent guest on Tom Woods' program. Gene Epstein, I think, is who it is. I think it's Gene Epstein. Well, in any case, if it's not, I'll remember. In any case, he posits that you must consider the baby in the mother's womb as the equivalent, and this is his analogy, of somebody that you've taken on a balloon ride with you. You brought them in the balloon, you put them in the balloon, you go up in the air, you go on your balloon ride. You don't get to just toss them off your balloon because you want to lighten the load. Likewise, the baby didn't choose to be there. You put the baby there. You invited the baby in, so to speak. You don't get to just dispose of the baby because you want to. Now, I know all about the usual provisos. Well, life of the mother, and then some say health of the mother, and, well, the baby's not going to survive anyway. Okay, fine. You can have your 1 to 3% exceptions to the rule. I would still say 2 wrongs don't make a right. But if that's what it takes to end the Holocaust of babies, I'd be willing to go with that. But unfortunately, the libertarians can't even come to their own conclusion to where everybody can be on the same page. And I think a lot of that is based off the libertine streak within libertarianism. And for those of you that don't know, libertine means basically I can do whatever I want without any self-control, without any moderation. And they don't all feel that way. It's a very common streak. So they don't want to interfere with somebody doing their own quote-unquote medical decisions. Which, again, I don't agree with them. But that's an issue. I guess if there was going to be a third issue, they talk about the non-aggression principle, right? And the non-aggression principle has been extrapolated out to something called the zero aggression principle. And that is very good on paper. That is very good in theory. But as a practical matter, when you get in the nitty-gritty of what is aggression, what's not aggression, there's a lot to be ferreted out. There's a lot to discuss. So if somebody keeps taunting you and you smack them, did you violate the principle? I don't know. I don't know that there's a good answer on that. Not one that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm sure somebody's got an answer, but I'm sure it's equally refuted somewhere else. If somebody keeps poking you and you overreact, are you now the aggressor? Or is it somebody that poked you the aggressor? But now you've overreacted, so you've not met eye for an eye. So I think a lot of that, which is funny because one of the podcasts I listen to has a guy who calls himself the Chocolate Knox. He talks about how biblical law actually came up with a solution for that. That's where the verbiage, an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, comes from. That you're supposed to have a biblical justice. You're supposed to have a judgment that is equal to the penalty, or that makes the penalty equal to the offense. We don't do that. So, I mean, so those are just some of the struggles. I mean, and when you get into basically everything being illegal, well, yeah, everything can be legal, but it doesn't make everything moral. It doesn't make everything good. And I think that's a very challenging area that, has to be sorted out. Now, again, Tom Woods and Ron Paul both have spent a lot of time talking about that. I think it was Ron Paul in South Carolina said, well, if they legalized heroin tomorrow, how many of you would go out and try it? Well, I would think that answer is self-evident that hardly anybody would. We know what heroin will do to you. We know how it will trash you. So, I mean, again, this is, kind of that area where do you go from being, an anarchist or a agorist to a libertarian to a constitutionalist to a conservative to a, there's so many areas, right? So before I fully embraced the libertarian verbiage, I always considered myself more of a paleoconservative. And now that I've kind of shifted out from maybe accepting the full brand libertarian, maybe I see myself drifting back into the paleoconservative, because I'm pretty sure nobody likes war in either of those camps. I'm pretty sure that you don't go start wars because they're preemptive wars. I mean, it's something like out of the Minority Report. Well, we know they're going to do bad things, so we're going to go bomb them now. I'm sorry. There's so many things that go on there. There's so many questions and discussions that could be had, right? These are the things that we need to be willing to address. These are the things that, the three C's, right? The constitutionalists, the conservatives, and the Christians, they need to be willing to address and have those discussions and have arguments. Yes, get agitated, get verbose, get excited, raise your voice a little bit, get emotional if that's what it takes. Get involved. Have these discussions. Understand what you believe, why you believe it, what your friends believe, why they believe it, what your enemies think. You need to understand what your enemies think. You don't need to understand and agree, but you do need to understand so that when you speak to them, you can meet them at their level. You can speak their language, that you can address them in a way that recognizes that, hey, we're all children of God. You've got some messed up ideas there that we should take from everybody and give to everybody else. You've got some messed up ideas there where you're justifying theft or you're justifying murder. But we're going to talk about this one-on-one. We're going to talk about this in a group, and we're going to engage so that we can all understand what each other believes and why you believe it. There is always going to be a final authority that we have to answer to. The question is would you rather have it be men? Rule of men? Would you rather have it be rule of law? Would you rather have it be God's law? Or would you rather have no law at all, which, if there's no law at all, always results in rule of man? Because the biggest guy or the biggest group always ends up in charge. There's really not much you can do to prevent that. So when a group becomes large enough and does enough bad things, at a certain point you've got to say, enough's enough. We're not going to continue to go along with this. We don't care that you have 51% of the people that think this is a good idea. These things are wrong. We have no business doing this. But they have 51%. What are your options? What can you do? Well, in 1776, some folks fired off something called the Declaration of Independence. And in July 2nd, they passed the Lee Amendment, which recognized themselves as 13 independent states, no longer colonies under the direct control of the government out of Britain. The Parliament and the King could no longer direct what they would do. They were free to make their own decisions. They were free to set up their own government. They were free to determine what their best course of action would be going forward. And while that was one empire that came to an end, there were several more that followed, whether it was the French Empire, which we all know what happened there. That was not good. Look up the history of the French Revolution and what happened to the various groups as they've gotten power and then dealt with their friends and enemies alike. Then after that, we have the Russian Revolution, right? And then there were some various things that happened in the Austria-Hungarian Empire, the Spanish Empire, and then the Habsburgs are thrown in there for good measure. And, don't forget the Rothschilds. Sorry, just had to do that for effect. But the reality is, we have always known and recognized that we have innate, God-given rights, that governments are put in place to respect and protect those rights. And when they ceased to form that function, we are no longer bound to that government. We are supposed to go along with the king so long as he's being a good king and a good sovereign and taking care of his people. Now, in the United States, we have a unique situation where we, the people, created the ruling document, the Constitution. And those we've then elected to represent us, in fact, don't. In fact, they routinely ignore the ruling document. In fact, they routinely work against that same ruling document. They are the ones that are causing the problem. They are the ones that need to go. They're the ones that need to be punished. The question is, what is the best way to do that? What is the appropriate way to do that? How do we best accomplish those means? One such way is to tell them to go away. One such way is to pick up the ball and walk away yourself. And one such way would be a counter-revolution. Now, one would say we've already gone through the first revolution, so that's why I would say it's a counter-revolution, right? If you really believe the outcome of November and January's events were real and legit, I'm sorry, maybe you need to just turn this off. I can't convince you. I don't have all the evidence, but something surely stinks there. Something surely is wrong there. I don't know that I can do justice trying to explain what it all is that went wrong or how it is that we got from there to here. But I can tell you that rather than fight, rather than create another civil war, the best and easiest solution is a divorce. Yeah. You heard me say that right. A number of states just tell the feds, hey, it's been good, it's been fun, we had our 200 years together, but honestly, you're abusive. Honestly, you're not the spouse I married. You're not the same thing. In fact, you're downright evil. And even the Christian church says that the wife can leave her husband if he's abusive and evil. Or even worse yet, the husband can leave his wife if she is adulterous. And when your leaders are selling you out to foreign powers, I can't think of a better analogy than to say they're being adulterous. They're the seditious, traitorous bunch. They're the ones that are selling us out for a little bit of extra coin. They got their 30 coins of silver. I'm not suggesting that we take them out, though some would say that's the easiest. No, I know full well that's not easy. In fact, I know full well the amount of bloodshed, pain, and sorrow that will come from that would never be justified. But an amicable divorce would work. Texas can go our own way. There's a number of states in the inland Northwest that would probably go their own way. Heck, there's probably a chunk of the Midwest that would like to say sayonara. Oh, you can keep Chicago and Milwaukee, but we're going to go do our own thing. Oh, you can have Minneapolis and Detroit. We're going to go our own way. Empires break apart. They fail over time. The fact that we don't accept that or we don't understand that is because we're not aware of what's happened historically. We're not aware of the natural order of events. Things come together, things go apart. Things come back together, things go back apart. Our country, the nationalist view of our country, that we're all one great America, is simply a myth. Oh, we tried to make it work. We did our best, especially between World War I, World War II, and then the aftermath to come together to defeat the commies. But if it isn't readily apparent to you now that there's at least 2 to 7 countries within a country, there's at least more than one body within the larger body, you got to ask yourself, would we be better if we were apart? Could we work together with our neighboring country? I mean, we partner with Mexico and Canada all the time without any great problems. They're completely their own sovereigns. Why couldn't Texas do the same thing? Why couldn't Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming do the same thing? Why couldn't the Upper Peninsula and the upper half of Wisconsin and the upper third of Minnesota go, yeah, we're going to be our own country, thanks? I mean, I'm not saying there's any movement to do that, but why couldn't upstate New York say, hey, you know what? New York, you can have the island and the city. We're going to go our own way. Why couldn't a chunk of Virginia go join West Virginia? I mean, it's been done before. It was fine before. Why can't it happen now? I mean, for God's sake, they want to make D.C. a state. Really? I don't even know that that's constitutionally permissible. In fact, I've listened to several people speak on that issue, and they're plain about the way that that could never really happen. Not legitimately, at least. Now, we know why they want that to happen. They want to control the seat of power. They want to control us forever. So separate a few states, create new states out of existing states. Let certain states go off on their own. There's so many solutions here to end the abusive relationship between government and the people, yet we refuse to do that. We refuse to because we're going to stay timid, stay at home, and not want to offend, and not cause any strife, and just chant Romans 13. I'm sorry, but we can do better. If you call yourself a constitutionalist, you call yourself a conservative, you call yourself a Christian, it is your duty to go learn about these issues, to educate yourself on what's going on, why those things are happening, and what are our valid options. How do we fix this issue? How do we avoid a war? I don't want a war. If you want a war, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. That is not going to solve the problem. It may be the only option at some point in the future, but right now we're not there. Right now we have the opportunity and the means to avoid that. And we should be working towards that with every ounce and fiber of our being. So I'm telling you, we make the best choices we can, and we bring in the best people in the area to come talk about options, talk about ways to improve things, learn about the history that you don't know about, to get involved at various levels. So get off your butt. Next Monday, go invest 2 to 3 hours of your time, pony up $10, and come listen to the guy that wrote the book. Come see what Daniel Miller has to say about Texit. Come learn about it. And when you leave, you can still disagree with honor. When you leave, you can agree wholeheartedly, say, why didn't we think about this before? You can leave and say, hey, you know what? I see some valid arguments there, but I'm just not ready yet. Those are all valid responses. Those are all appropriate ways to look at that. But you'll at least hear the other side. You'll at least know the arguments. You will at least be educated on what the topic is. And that, my friends, is according to Callus. I will see you on the other side, or in this case, next Monday. Thanks.